Welcome to Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead in the next hour. Golden Jubilee, colourful celebration as Kenya marks a 50th birthday. And Al Ahly's vow, the Egyptian club keen to shake off national misery at the FIFA Club World Cup. We begin with news just in, indicating that the DR Congo President Joseph Kabila has signed a peace deal with the M23 rebel group at the State House in Nairobi. Now, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and a host of African leaders who were in Nairobi attending Kenya's 50th anniversary celebrations witnessed the signing. Details on that deal remain scanty, but previous attempts to broker a deal between the two sides have failed on several occasions. And a month ago, Kinshasa insisted that it would only acknowledge a declaration of defeat from the M23 rather than sign a peace deal, since a UN-backed Congolese troops handed the M23 a military defeat and pushed them out of their strongholds in eastern DR Congo. South Africa now, and Nelson Mandela's family says they are preparing for a difficult last walk to the former South African president's home village for his state funeral. Now, tens of thousands of people have filed through the Union buildings in Pretoria on the second day of lying in state. CCTV's Guy Henderson was allowed inside the auditorium in Pretoria.
It's now the second day of the official lying in state ceremony here at the Union buildings in Pretoria. People have been queuing through the night to ensure that they will have their final chance to say goodbye to Nelson Mandela. We understand that at its height, about 2,000 people have been channeling through this temporary structure you'll see behind me every single hour. That means that up to about 50,000 people will have been able to come through here over the course of the 3 days of this lying in state. Well, the body arrived at the Union buildings in Pretoria just a little after 8 a.m, accompanied by a full guard of honour from the South African Air Force and the tune of the South African national anthem playing in the background, all the while military helicopters circling the Union building and circling that procession as it made its way to the newly named Nelson Mandela Amphitheatre at the top of the Union buildings. Senior officers from the South African National Defence Force then carried the coffin up the steps to the temporary structure that's been put in place for this lying in state ceremony, followed behind by various members of the family, including Mr. Mandela's grandson, Mandla Mandela. That's in keeping with tradition, which dictates that the eldest son should remain with the body through the lying in state process. The South African flag was then removed from the coffin to reveal a perspex case underneath, of course, lying the body of Nelson Mandela himself. Foreign dignitaries still coming through here to pay their last respects, including the Cuban President Raul Castro. And then, of course, the general public began to pour through here as they had on the day before. The family have released a statement saying that Mr. Mandela would have been happy to have been surrounded by the love of so many thousands. Many of those thousands are continuing to pour through here in a much more sombre mood, really, than in the days previously, where there was this more celebratory scenes, at least outside of this location on the Wednesday. It is perhaps partly because people have had the chance now to see the body up close, allowing them to fully realise that Nelson Mandela is gone. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Pretoria.
Meanwhile, authorities in South Africa are investigating how a sign language interpreter accused of faking was cleared by the country's security apparatus. This as Tamsanga Dianti, who stood alongside national and international leaders at the event, blamed his actions on a schizophrenic episode. And in a twist to the entire episode, the agency who employed him South African interpreters has reportedly vanished. Angelo Coppola with that story.
How he exemplified the finest quality.
Despite this, the South African deaf community remains upset by the actions of the interpreter. Some have called his qualifications and abilities into question.
We're a bit shocked. Deaf people are very shocked about what happened. They couldn't understand what was being said, and I think it's something that should never happen again for deaf people, because they don't need that kind of service, where somebody who claims to be qualified but doesn't even know how to sign is allowed to be on national TV, on international TV. I think the interpreter should get training in sign language first of all. After getting training in sign language, he should meet deaf people so they can teach him and they can understand the norms of deaf people. After that, get a professional interpreters to teach him how to interpret. That's the stage that he should be taking right now.
The controversy around the translator, or the sign language interpreter as he is known, is far from over.
The services of a sign language interpreter is at between 1,300 and 1,700 rand an hour, but he is 800 rand a day.
While the storm clouds are brewing around this controversy, it remains to be seen how an unqualified sign language interpreter could stand that close to one of the most powerful men in the world. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV in Johannesburg.
Well, the man at the center of the storm, Thamsanqa Dianti, has denied allegations that he is a fraud. He has blamed his incoherent gesticulation during the Mandela Memorial Service watched across the world on a schizophrenic episode and hallucinations.
What happened that day? It was a very much, I don't know what could I call it. I see angels come to the stadium. And immediately I see angels come to the stadium. I start realizing that the problem is here. And the problem, I don't know the attack of this problem, how will it come? Sometimes I will react violent on that place. Sometimes I will see like things like chasing me. And then, you know, I was in a very, very, very difficult position.
Well, a week after their greatest son, Nelson Mandela, passed away, anticipation is mounting in the village of Kunu as preparations for his state funeral are in full swing. The South African government says around 4,000 mourners are expected to attend the funeral, but only a few hundred will attend the more private burial, which will take place after the official proceedings on Sunday. CCTV's correspondent Renee Delcam is in Kunu and has filed this report.
A village in mourning. Kunu is bracing itself to host one of the biggest events it has ever seen, the funeral of one of its own, the universally loved Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. The arena, which will accommodate the estimated 4,000 mourners at Madiba's funeral, has now been erected. And there is much activity and strict security at the gravesite, where Madiba will be buried with his 3 deceased children.
Now all the roads are leading to Kunu, and this morning I was asked by one of the relatives, one of his goddaughters, she said, "Please, Butbantu," referring to me, please, you must talk to Madiba now. He must please forgive us. The rain must stop. We want to give him a big farewell. And one just bowed down and scanned the message, and now it's better. All the programs inside, marquee tents, the infrastructure is in full swing. I'm satisfied with the progress made thus far.
And as the focus of Nelson Mandela's final farewell moves from Pretoria to Kunu, people here have been paying tribute to him at the Nelson Mandela Museum in the village. Many of them kids who say they will always carry the memory of Madiba in their hearts.
Madiba was the first president to us on Kunu. He has 2 houses because I love him too. We love Madiba. I love him so much. This house is very good.
Renee Delcam, CCTV, Kunu.
Well, Renee Delcam is standing by for us in Kunu. She will later speak with Bantu Holomisa, a South African member of parliament and the president of the United Democratic Movement and a close friend of the Mandela family. He's also involved in the funeral preparations. But first, Renee, to you, what is the latest from Kunu leading up to Sunday?
Well, the latest from Kunu is that security here is on high alert in preparation for Sunday, the big day, the funeral of Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. A huge media contingent has arrived from all around the world. So the stage is being set, everything in place for Sunday. But right with me now is the spokesperson for the Mandela family, Mr. Bantu Holomisa. Right now, we're just going to get a sense from him, from what we can expect to happen in the next few days. Mr. Holomisa, you say you're happy with the preparation so far. What can we expect to see on Saturday when Madiba's body arrives from Pretoria?
We expect that the Mandela family will be welcoming Madiba at the airport, and there will be some few words uttered to welcome him back, and then we take him through the streets and villages of Mthatha straight to his home. All the streets, main streets, will be lined up by the communities. When he arrives at home, again the chief or a king will also utter some words of welcome, and then he will be taken to his bedroom, and the family will be welcomed in a separate room as well. That's how we will be doing on Saturday morning. And of course on Sunday he will be taken through a gun carriage, escorted by a brigade to the main marquee tent where the funeral service will be conducted by a military chaplain as well as the head of Methodist Church in Southern Africa. The President of the Republic will speak, and the representative of the international communities will also have a say. There will be also spokespersons representing the family, and then the sermon. After that, Madiba will be taken to his last resting place, not far from the marquee tent.
You have been like a son to Nelson Mandela. Can you take us through those final moments on Thursday when you realized that he was slipping away?
When I received the call that Madiba is not doing well, I drove down from Pretoria to his house. On my arrival, his eldest daughter, Magaziwa Mandela, took me straight to his bedroom. And on my arrival, I saw his wife, Mrs. Gracia Machel, as well as Mrs. Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and a doctor. Looking at Madiba, and I could see that he was different from what I had seen him before. And I paid my last respect. As I was standing there, I was asking myself, could it be that I'm seeing him for the last time? About 4 minutes after that, I left the house, and of course, I was still in a state of denial to say that, no, well, Madiba was serious at some stage. Maybe he will pull it through.
You've described Nelson Mandela as one in a million. My condolences to you and the family once again. That was Bantu Holomisa, the spokesperson rather for the Mandela family. He will play a leading role in the arrangements going forward until Sunday, when Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela is finally laid to rest amongst his ancestors here in Kunu.
All right, CCTV's Renee Delcam joining us there from Kunu. Thank you. Now, few can claim to have had a closer working relationship with Nelson Mandela than his former deputy and successor as president, Thabo Mbeki. CCTV's Famida Miller had a sit-down with Mbeki where the former South African president opened up on how Mandela's passing had impacted him.
Mr. Mbeki, we often forget about the personal relationship that Mr. Mandela had with various people, including yourself, a comrade, an elder, a friend. What is it like dealing with that loss for you?
It's difficult. I mean, we say quite correctly that we've got to celebrate the life of Nelson Mandela. It's correct. We should do that. But I think it's also difficult to pretend that there is no element of mourning. There has to be, because I started working directly personally with Nelson Mandela when I was 19 years old. So I've known him since then, and I've always been, when he was not in jail and we're not in exile, been able to talk to him quite easily, raise anything with him, he would raise anything with me, and you know, his point of view, it was important always. What do you think about this? And he would respond, and you might agree, disagree, but always important to get to know. But now that he's gone, he's not there to answer. There's nobody to, and I've got something I really need to check with somebody who's older, who's more senior. He is not there. It's a loss, it's a loss. It means, in a sense, we've got to be a little bit more self-reliant. But it is a loss. And we'll celebrate the life, but it's not, one cannot pretend.
Mr. Mbeki, I'd like to just finish off by...
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up, Golden Jubilee, colourful celebration as Kenya marks its 50th birthday. And a humanitarian crisis. Relief agencies call for urgent intervention in the Central African Republic. We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need to trade justice. Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world. Welcome back. Tens of thousands of Kenyans celebrated 50 years of self-rule at the Safaricom Stadium in the capital, Nairobi, on Thursday. At least 15 heads of state joined in the celebrations as well. Kofa Mrenje has more.
Pomp and color as Kenyans celebrate their Golden Jubilee. 50 years of self-governance after many years of struggle and fighting the colonial masters. Congratulatory messages came in from across Africa.
That your struggle was coated with pains, sweat, tears, and blood. So there is every reason for you to celebrate today.
You did not just fight for Kenya's freedom, but for us too. Because of the uprising in Kenya, the colonialists gave us freedom without a struggle.
The British colonial government finally handed over power to Kenya's first president, the late Jomo Kenyatta, on the 12th of December 1963. At midnight that day, the colonial flag was lowered and the Kenyan flag hoisted, beginning the long journey of self-governance.
This is indeed an opportune moment for us here in the region, and even more so for my brothers in Kenya, to look back on the last 50 years and reflect on the achievements made and the disappointments occasioned.
Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta, however, had a message to developed nations. After 50 years of self-rule, he believes time has come for developed nations to look at the African continent in a different way.
It is important to recognize that Africa has come of age. Africa seeks constructive partnerships. We will embrace partnerships based on mutual respect and win-win scenarios. We will not accept partnerships that do not recognize we also have the intellectual capacity to engage on equal terms. Africa has a voice, and 50 years after independence, Africa demands that its voice must be heard.
It's been a long journey for Kenya. The struggle for independence was long and tough. 50 years down the line, the country has made significant progress. However, it is still facing challenges.
Insecurity, health, education and infrastructure are just some of the sectors that have been a challenge for the successive governments in Kenya. Kofa Mrenje, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, guests attending the Kenya at 50 celebrations were treated the best cultural offerings from across Kenya, Burundi and Rwanda, which are part of the East African Community Bloc, also sent in entertainers to bolster the carnival mood. CCTV's Maria Galang has the story.
A celebration for the ages. Thousands made their way to the Safaricom Kasarani Stadium in the outskirts of the capital, Nairobi, to celebrate 50 years of independence. Kenyans from all walks of life, eager to revel in the jubilation. As the crowds marveled at the number of presidents who graced the occasion, on the fringes of the entrances were performers from across the country. Turkana in the north, Kuria in the west, Momboko dancers from central Kenya, and even drummers from neighboring Rwanda and Burundi. This is the competitors' entrance to the stadium. Here is where all the performers, the dancers, are all huddled, ready to perform inside the stadium at this prestigious occasion. Some of them have been practicing for months on end. Sir, how excited do you feel to be performing today, Kenya at 50?
Very exciting, very exciting.
Where have you come from?
We are from Western Kenya.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. How about yourself? How long have you been practicing to perform at Kenya at 50?
Like the last 2 weeks it's been held, but finally we get to perform for our country. This is what our parents and grandparents fought for, and finally we get to see it ourselves 50 years later. It's a wonderful thing.
We are here because Kenya is a good friend of ours. We are happy to celebrate 50 years of independence together with Kenya.
For Nyota Gaviganjama, the celebration is a reminder of his days as a Mau Mau freedom fighter back in the 1950s and 60s.
I fought alongside Dedan Kimathi and Jello Madenge. The colonialists thought that they would beat us and get rid of us in 2 years. But they were wrong. We fought until we achieved the freedom you enjoy today.
William Karuku also reflects on his fight for freedom. However, his memories are slightly tainted.
This fight interrupted my education. I had to leave school and work during the day, and I was a Mau Mau freedom fighter by night. But now, I don't have anything to my name.
Despite his current strife, he made his way to the stadium to join in the festivities with his fellow Kenyans, proud to be part of a country that continues to strive to achieve the aspirations of the independence heroes and founding fathers. Maria Galang, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
Kenya is also celebrating 50 years of diplomatic relations with China. CCTV's Tang Boy in Beijing tells us about the 50 years of economic trade and cultural exchanges between the two countries.
The year 2013 marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between China and Kenya. The bilateral ties date back to December the 14th, 1963, 2 days after the formal establishment of Kenya independence, when China was among the first to open an embassy in Nairobi. After 50 years of development of bilateral trade and economic cooperation, China has become Kenya's biggest foreign direct investment source, with more than $470 million invested in the East African country. Statistics from the Chinese embassy in Nairobi show that the bilateral trade has boomed in recent years, with an annual surge of 30% to more than $2 billion. China has become the second largest trade partner to Kenya. Cultural exchanges have been working as a crucial booster of the bilateral ties. The Confucius Institutes in University of Nairobi, Kenyatta University and Egerton University attract thousands of Kenyan students, of whom many have opportunities to study in China with scholarships from the Chinese government. The Kenyan president visited China this August, and Premier Li Keqiang met with the president and said China is willing to cooperate with Kenya to push bilateral ties to a higher level. The visit was regarded highly as a chance to further the bilateral ties, as both countries are breaching the 50th anniversary of the bilateral relations.
And we still have more news, views and analysis for you here on Africa Live, including humanitarian crisis. Relief agencies call for urgent intervention in the Central African Republic. Aid agencies in the Central African Republic say the country is facing a dire humanitarian situation, with more than half of the population in need of immediate assistance. The United Nations says more than 500,000 people have been displaced since the crisis began a year ago, and a recent resurgence in violence in the capital Bangui, which has left over 400 people dead and has forced over 100,000 others to flee their homes. CCTV's Kate Parkinson tells us more.
Hundreds of people wait patiently for food. Like many thousands here in Bangui, they've fled their homes following the recent fighting. Aid agencies say around 30 camps have sprung up around the capital, but the ongoing insecurity means assistance is not reaching all who need it. Thousands are living in fields next to the airport, where the French military are based. They say they feel safer here than at home, but conditions are squalid.
The situation is very severe. It's even catastrophic, I would say. It's between 30,000 or 40,000 people in this camp. More are coming every day. They have nothing. They are sleeping on the ground. They have no shelter. There is not enough food. There is not enough food. There is not enough water. There's only 2 water points that I've seen, and there is no latrines at all. None for 40,000 people. And we are the only actors here setting up this clinic.
The United States has pledged $40 million to an African Union-led peacekeeping mission currently being deployed in the Central African Republic as the international community tries to stabilize the country, often referred to as the world's forgotten crisis. The Central African Republic is one of the poorest countries in the world, and for decades it's suffered from instability. But now the country's in chaos, on the verge of anarchy even, and life is even harder for these people. All they can do now is wait and hope that the world wakes up and brings them the help they so desperately need. Kate Parkinson, CCTV, Bangui, in the Central African Republic.
Zimbabwe's ZANU-PF's national conference is underway in the Mashonaland West Province, a stronghold of the party. Now, top on the agenda at the conference is the economy, as President Mugabe seeks to secure his legacy. The president is under threat from a decade-long recession and recently internal wrangling over his possible successor. CCTV's Farai Mwakutuya looks back at President Mugabe's checkered reign.
For decades, the revolutionary leader enjoyed massive popularity and complete control of the southern African country. In the early years after independence, his government made significant investments in human capital, delivery of free basic social services, and smallholder agriculture. Thanks to the focus on education, 92% of Zimbabwe's 14 million population is literate, placing it at number 1 on the continent. Agriculture remains the mainstay of the economy, despite a slump following a land redistribution exercise in 2000. That land reform program marked Mugabe's fallout with the West. The US, UK and EU all imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe, which Mugabe said were illegal and aimed at removing him from power. Critics have argued that his anti-West stance has come at a huge cost. However, some of his most fierce critics admire his steadfastness.
Robert Mugabe is principled. This is the type of person who says, I will die for this, and they mean it.
A low point in Mugabe's 33-year rule came in 2008 when he lost a first round of voting in presidential elections to longtime rival Morgan Tsvangirai. He later won a runoff, but his ZANU-PF party was forced into a coalition government with the MDC. Mugabe bounced back in 2013, securing 61% of the vote in presidential elections that were given a clean bill of health by the AU and SADC. Some Western governments have refused to accept the result, attracting more taunts from Mugabe.
We are delivering democracy in a platter, on a platter. Do you take it? We say take it or leave it.
He swept to victory by promising millions of jobs and to revive Zimbabwe's economy. Analysts predict this will be Mugabe's biggest test yet. Much needed foreign direct investment is being kept at bay as investors fear the country's indigenization laws. Apart from the economic challenge, Mugabe is also faced with an internal battle to succeed him. It is alleged that there are two factions in ZANU-PF, led by the Vice President and Justice Minister respectively, and they are engaged in a bitter turf war ahead of an elective Congress next year where a potential successor could be elected to deputize Mugabe.
In the weeks leading up to this conference, some have suggested that the succession battles could split the party. Now, while this issue may not make it onto the agenda of the conference, some analysts predict that President Mugabe's failure to appoint a clear successor could affect his legacy of being a revolutionary leader. Farai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.